Iran just launched again, and this time the world is not looking away. Missiles in the air, drones crossing borders, and a region holding its breath, wondering if this is finally the moment everything breaks open. Where are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments because people from over 50 countries have been following this story, and I want to know where you are standing when history is being made. Now let me be very clear about what this video is. This is not a news bulletin. This is the complete picture. Every attack Iran has carried out, every proxy move, every direct strike, every calculated escalation, all the way up to what happened on May 4th and 5th of 2026. By the time this ends, you will understand not just what Iran did, but why they did it, how they planned it, and what comes next. Most people only see the headline. You are about to see the entire blueprint. But here's the thing. The story the mainstream media keeps telling you is always about the latest explosion, the latest drone, the latest missile. They never zoom out, they never show you the full map, and when you see the full map, everything changes. So let us go back to the beginning and build this picture properly. Iran has never believed in fighting its enemies face to face. That is not weakness. That is strategy. For decades, Tehran built what military analysts call an axis of resistance, a carefully constructed web of armed groups spread across the Middle East, each one trained, funded, and directed by a single unit inside the Iranian military called the IRGC Quds Force. Most people have heard of the IRGC. Very few understand how the Quds Force actually operates. This is not a regular military command. It functions more like a shadow government with its own budget, its own foreign policy, and its own network of relationships with militia leaders, terror financiers, and weapons smugglers across Lebanon, Gaza, Yemen, Iraq, and Syria. The late General Qasem Soleimani ran this network for nearly 2 decades. He did not just send weapons. He personally flew into conflict zones, sat with militia commanders, and designed battle plans. When the United States killed him in January 2020, Iran lost its most brilliant operator, but the network he built did not die with him. It kept running, and it kept attacking. Through Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iran had a missile arsenal pointed at Israel that numbered over 100,000 rockets, more than most nation-states possess. Through Hamas in Gaza, Iran had a presence right on Israel's southern border. Through the Houthis in Yemen, Iran had leverage over one of the most important shipping lanes on the planet. Through Iraqi militias like Kataib Hezbollah and the Popular Mobilization Forces, Iran had armed factions operating inside a country where American soldiers were stationed. This is what forward defense looks like in practice. Iran does not wait to be attacked on its own soil. It projects threats outward so that any war against Iran begins far from Iranian territory. Every attack you are about to hear was not random. Every single one was a move inside this larger strategy. Then came October 7th, 2023, and the world shifted. On that morning, Hamas launched the largest and most brutal assault on Israeli soil since the country was founded. Over 1,200 people were killed. Around 250 were taken hostage into Gaza. The scale of it shocked even seasoned intelligence analysts. But here's what the headlines did not explain clearly enough. Hamas did not plan and execute this operation alone. Senior Hamas military commanders later confirmed in intercepted communications and in statements made to journalists that Iranian officials, specifically within the IRGC, had been involved in the planning discussions for months. Iran did not pull the trigger, but Iran handed Hamas the gun, trained the shooters, and according to multiple intelligence assessments from both American and Israeli agencies, Iranian leadership gave a quiet approval for the operation to move forward when it did. The timing was not accidental either. It came at a moment when Israel and Saudi Arabia were moving closer to a historic normalization agreement, a deal that would have reshaped the entire region and left Iran dangerously isolated. One attack ended those talks overnight. That is not coincidence. That is calculation. What followed in Israel's response to Gaza changed the political temperature across the entire Middle East. Iran watched as its proxy in Gaza absorbed devastating military pressure. Hezbollah began firing rockets from Lebanon. Houthi missiles started flying toward Israel from Yemen. Iraqi militias launched drones at American bases. The entire axis of resistance activated. And then, in April 2024, Iran did something it had never done before in its entire history. April 13th, 2024, Iran launched a direct attack on Israeli territory for the first time ever. Operation True Promise, as Tehran called it, involved over 330 projectiles, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and one-way attack drones, all fired from Iranian soil, all aimed at Israel. On paper, it looked like an act of war. In reality, it was one of the most carefully choreographed pieces of strategic theater in modern military history, and here is the insider detail that most coverage completely missed. Iran pre-announced this attack, not officially, but through diplomatic back channels. Iranian officials warned Jordanian, Saudi, and American representatives that a response was coming, giving them a window of roughly 72 hours. Jordan then opened its airspace to coalition forces and actually helped shoot down Iranian drones. The United States, the United Kingdom, France, and Israel's own Iron Dome and Arrow systems intercepted approximately 99% of the incoming projectiles. Very little damage was done on the ground, and Iran stood before its domestic audience and said, "We struck the Zionist entity directly, and they could not stop us from launching." Both things are technically true. Iran fired, Israel intercepted. Iran used the launch as a propaganda victory at home while keeping actual escalation controlled abroad. That is a level of strategic sophistication that most people watching the news never saw because nobody explained it this way. Israel responded with a limited strike inside Iranian territory, hitting air defense radar systems near Isfahan. Iran's response to that response was silence, no retaliation, because the message had been sent and received on both sides. But the balance was already shifting. 6 months later, in October 2024, Iran launched its second direct ballistic missile attack on Israel. This one was different in a way that alarmed military analysts significantly. The missiles used were faster. They flew on flatter, more depressed trajectories, meaning they were harder for existing defense systems to track and intercept. Targets included Israeli Air Force bases, specifically Nevatim Air Base in the Negev, which houses F-35 fighter jets. This was not symbolic. Targeting F-35 infrastructure is a serious military calculation. It signals that Iran's doctrine had evolved from demonstrating capability to actually attempting to degrade Israeli strike capacity. The interception rate remained high, but not perfect this time. Some missiles reached their targets. Craters appeared on runways. The gap between demonstration and damage was closing. Every analyst watching took note. While Iran was firing missiles directly, its proxy in Yemen was running a parallel campaign that was costing the global economy billions of dollars per month. The Houthis, from the moment Israel began its Gaza operation, started targeting commercial shipping in the Red Sea. Container ships, oil tankers, cargo vessels, any ship they believed had a connection to Israel or to countries supporting Israel. What began as harassment became a sustained naval warfare campaign. The Houthis deployed anti-ship ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and explosive-laden drones. They seized vessels, they fired at U.S. Navy warships, the USS Carney, the USS Gravely, multiple other American destroyers, expended tens of millions of dollars in interceptor missiles shooting down Houthi drones. Here is the expert calculation that Iran understood perfectly. Every time an American destroyer fires a $3 million SM-2 missile to shoot down a $20,000 Houthi drone, Iran wins economically. The math of asymmetric warfare is brutally simple. Force your enemy to spend $100 for every $1 you spend, and eventually their magazine runs dry before your will does. Global shipping companies began rerouting around the Cape of Good Hope at the southern tip of Africa, adding 10 to 14 days and enormous fuel costs to every journey. Insurance premiums for Red Sea transits went through the roof. Iran never fired a single missile in this campaign, but Iran directed every part of it. On the ground in Iraq and Syria, Iranian-backed militias were running a separate front. Between October 2023 and early 2024, U.S. military bases across Iraq and Syria were attacked over 160 times. Rocket attacks, drone strikes, indirect fire. American soldiers were injured repeatedly. Then in late January 2024, a base known as Tower 22, located in northeastern Jordan near the Syrian and Iraqi borders, was struck by a one-way attack drone. 3 American soldiers were killed. Dozens were wounded. It was the first time American military personnel had been killed by Iran-backed fire since the current escalation cycle began. The Biden administration responded with strikes on over 85 targets in Iraq and Syria, hitting IRGC-linked facilities and militia command centers. Iran publicly denied involvement, but the drone that killed those soldiers was identified as an Iranian-designed Shahed series drone, the same model Iran has been producing and exporting to its proxy networks across the region. Deniability in modern proxy warfare is a legal and political fiction. The weapons, the training, the targeting guidance all trace back to Tehran. Now we arrive at May 4th and 5th of 2026. The latest chapter, and in many ways the most revealing one yet. Reports emerging from the region on May 4th confirmed a fresh escalation involving Iranian-linked forces launching strikes. The targets and vectors pointed to a coordinated operation, not a spontaneous reaction. And this is the question every serious analyst was asking: why now? Why at this particular moment did Iran choose to escalate again? To answer that properly, you have to look at what was happening inside Iran and around it in the weeks leading up to May 4th. Iran's economy was under severe pressure. New sanctions had tightened the flow of oil revenues. The Iranian rial had lost significant value. Domestically, the regime faced discontent from a population exhausted by decades of economic hardship and political repression. When an authoritarian government faces internal pressure, history shows us it almost always does one of two things. It cracks down harder internally, or it creates an external crisis to redirect public anger outward. The May 4th escalation carries the fingerprints of the second option. Additionally, nuclear negotiations between Iran and Western powers had stalled again. Iran had continued advancing its uranium enrichment program past levels that serve any civilian nuclear purpose, and international pressure was building for a harder response. Launching an attack, or authorizing proxies to launch one, gives Iran leverage at the negotiating table. It signals that the cost of inaction is higher than the cost of engagement. It forces conversations that Iran wants to have on Iran's terms. That is not irrational. That is coercive diplomacy executed with missiles. When you lay out every attack from the pre-October 7th proxy campaign through the direct strikes of April and October 2024, through the Red Sea campaign, through Tower 22, through the May 2026 escalation, a single strategic doctrine becomes visible. Iran calls it forward defense. Western analysts call it escalation management. Whatever name you use, the principle is the same. Iran believes that the only way to prevent a direct attack on its homeland is to keep its enemies permanently engaged on multiple fronts far from Iranian soil. Keep Israel managing Hezbollah, Hamas, and Houthi threats simultaneously. Keep America burning through its missile stockpiles and political capital in Iraq, Syria, and the Red Sea. Keep the Gulf states nervous enough to not fully align with Washington against Tehran. Every attack is a thread in this larger fabric. None of them are accidents. None of them are emotional outbursts. They are investments in a strategic position that Iran has been building for 40 years. And the reason the world keeps being surprised by Iranian escalation is because the world keeps analyzing each attack individually instead of reading the pattern. Here is where this leaves us. Iran is not winning every engagement militarily. Its proxies have been hit hard. Gaza has been devastated. Hezbollah's leadership has been decimated by Israeli strikes. The Houthi military infrastructure has absorbed significant damage. But Iran measures success differently. As long as its enemies are spending more than Iran is spending, as long as the pressure stays off Iranian soil, as long as the regime survives domestically and the nuclear program advances, Iran considers itself to be ahead. The question the entire region is now sitting with is whether the current escalation cycle will finally cross the threshold where one of the major powers, Israel, the United States, or Iran itself, makes a miscalculation large enough to trigger a war that none of the proxy games can contain. That is the question nobody can answer right now. Not intelligence agencies, not governments, not the analysts who have been watching this for decades. What they can tell you is that the pattern has never moved backward. It has only ever moved forward. And forward, right now, is pointing somewhere very dangerous. So here's what I want you to do. If this video helped you actually understand what is happening and why, hit that like button right now, because it tells the algorithm this information matters and it gets it in front of more people who need to see it. Subscribe if you want to stay ahead of this story, because this situation is not cooling down and we will be covering every development as it happens. And drop your prediction in the comments. Where does this go next? Does Iran miscalculate and trigger a wider war, or does the pressure find a release valve before it reaches that point? Tell me what you think, because right now, every informed voice matters.